I wasn't supposed to be on that road. If the county hadn't decided to tear up Route 9 for improvements, I'd have been home 10 minutes earlier, microwaving leftover pasta and pretending I wasn't tired of eating alone at my kitchen counter. My name's Evan Mercer. I'm a single dad, 38, and I've got a 12-year-old daughter, Lila, who's the kind of kid that says, "It's okay, Dad," when it's clearly not okay. That day, I was already running late to pick her up from after-school choir. Again. And I was rehearsing my apology in my head while the rain hammered my windshield like it had a personal grudge. The detour dumped me onto a back road locals call Hollow Creek Lane, a two-lane strip of asphalt that snakes past old cornfields and forgotten barns, the kind of place your phone loses signal and your headlights feel like they're pushing against the dark. I remember thinking, this is how horror movies start. Then I laughed at myself because real life isn't a movie. 5 minutes later, I saw something that made my foot slam the brake. At first it was just a shape, a lump of shadow on the shoulder. Then my headlights caught metal. A wheelchair. And in that wheelchair, hunched forward like she was trying to disappear into herself, was a girl. Not a child. Not an older woman. A young woman, soaked so badly her hair was plastered to her face. Her shoulders shaking so hard the chair rattled. She didn't wave. She didn't stand up. She just sat there, taking the rain like punishment. My first thought, I'll be honest, wasn't noble. It was, this is dangerous. This is a setup. Keep driving, Evan. Then I saw her hand. Her fingers were blue. Not cold outside blue. The kind of blue that means your body is losing the fight. That's when my second thought kicked in, louder than the first. If I leave her here, she dies. I pulled over, hazards flashing, and the wind shoved my door open like it wanted to drag me into the storm. I stepped out, boots sinking into wet gravel, and the rain hit my face so hard it stung. "Hey," I shouted, because that's what you do when you don't know what else to do. "Miss, can you hear me?" She lifted her head slowly, and when I saw her eyes, that's the part one still can't shake. Hazel, wide, terrified. Not the fear of a stranger approaching, but the fear of someone realizing help might finally be real. Her lips moved like they didn't want to work. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't leave me." Something in my chest tightened. "I'm not leaving," I said, and I meant it before I even understood why. "What's your name?" She swallowed, shivering so hard her teeth clicked. Sienna. Sienna. I repeated, grounding it like a rope. "Okay, I'm Evan. We're getting you out of this." I didn't ask permission. I didn't debate morality. I just lifted her. And she weighed almost nothing, like her body had been running on empty for a long time. She clung to my jacket with numb fingers while I carried her to my SUV. I folded the wheelchair and shoved it in the back, hands slippery from rain, heart pounding in my ears. Once she was inside, I cranked the heat all the way up, wrapped my spare hoodie around her shoulders, and shoved my travel mug of coffee toward her. She tried to drink, and her hands shook so badly the lid rattled. I reached for my phone. "We need to call an ambulance." "No." The word came out sharp, stronger than her body looked capable of. I froze. She grabbed my sleeve like a warning. "No hospital. Please. They'll find me." I turned in my seat. "Who will?" Her gaze locked on mine, and there was something in it that made my stomach drop. Not drama. Not exaggeration. Raw, practiced fear. "My stepmother," she said. "And her son. They did this. They left me here." The rain drummed on the roof, steady and heavy, and my brain tried to reject what I'd just heard. Because it was insane. But then she added, almost like she hated the words in her own mouth, "They were waiting for the storm." That's when I knew, in the quiet way you know when something is true, that this wasn't random. It was planned. I made a decision that, depending on who you ask, was either the dumbest thing I've ever done or the only thing I could have done. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm even though my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. "No hospital. Not yet. But you're coming somewhere safe, and you're telling me what happened." She nodded, and her eyes filled with tears like her body finally allowed it. I called Lila's choir teacher while I drove, told her I got stuck in the detour, and asked if she could keep Lila a little longer. She agreed. But I hated it anyway. I hate being the dad who's always late. Then I called my neighbor, Ms. Harrow. Retired nurse, tough as nails, the kind of woman who can look at you and know you're lying. "Ruth," I said, "I need help. I'm bringing someone home." She didn't ask questions on the phone. She just said, "Put the kettle on when you get here." Sienna talked in pieces as the heat slowly brought her back. She'd been out there for hours. She'd screamed until her throat burned. She said she thought she was hallucinating when she saw my headlights. Why would they do that? I asked, even though I was already lining up the answer in my head. She stared down at her hands. My dad died 3 weeks ago. The words landed hard because I recognized that kind of timeline. Grief still fresh, paperwork still moving, people still pretending they're sad while calculating what they get. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it more than she probably realized. My wife died 5 years ago during what was supposed to be a routine surgery. One day she was laughing at breakfast. The next, I was learning how to make my daughter's hair look halfway decent before school. Loss doesn't just hurt. It rearranges you. Sienna swallowed. My dad was the only person who never made me feel like a burden, she said. Even after my accident. Accident? I asked. Horseback riding, she said. I was 16. I fell. And I never got my legs back. She said it like she'd said it 1,000 times to strangers who didn't know what to do with that information. And your stepmother? I asked. She wasn't always like this, Sienna said, then let out a laugh that sounded like it broke her a little. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't see it. She explained how her stepmother, Maris, came into their lives all warmth and casseroles and fake concern, and how her stepbrother, Nolan, played the role of charming helper. Always offering to push her chair, always asking questions about her care plan. The questions got sharper once her dad got sick. Costs. Facilities. What happens if something happens to your dad? The kind of questions you only ask when you're already rehearsing the future. By the time we pulled into my driveway, Ms. Harrow was already on her porch with an umbrella, eyes narrowed like she was about to fight the weather itself. I carried Sienna inside while Ruth checked her vitals, muttering under her breath about hypothermia and idiots. Within 20 minutes, Sienna was in dry clothes, borrowed from a box of my late wife's things I hadn't been able to donate, sitting on my couch under a blanket with tea in both hands. When Lila came home, she stopped in the doorway and stared at Sienna, then looked at me like she was waiting for the truth. I started to speak, and Lila cut me off. Are you okay? She asked Sienna, simple as that. Sienna looked stunned, like nobody had asked her that in a long time. I'm getting there, she said. Lila nodded once, like she'd made a decision. The guest room is downstairs, she said. It has the bigger bathroom. I felt this painful swell of pride and guilt, because my kid is compassionate in ways I don't always deserve. That night, Sienna told us the rest. Her father's will had been read 2 days after the funeral. He'd updated it months before he died, and he left almost everything to her. The house, investments, a trust for her care. Maris and Nolan got a fixed amount, not small, but not what they wanted. They smiled through it, Sienna said. They hugged me. They told me Dad would be proud. Then 2 days later, they suggested a family trip to heal together. Like I was the problem they needed to manage. They drove her out of town. They took turns driving. They made small talk. Then Nolan pulled on a Hollow Creek lane and said the engine sounded weird. Maris suggested Sienna get some air, said the view was pretty. They helped her into the chair. They positioned her facing the road. Then they got back in the car. Sienna stared at her tea like it might confess something. I thought it was a joke, she whispered. Then Nolan looked at me. And he didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed, like I was an errand. And they drove away. I wanted to punch my own kitchen wall. Instead, I did what I've learned to do as a parent. I breathed. I thought. And then I said the sentence that changed the entire direction of the next few weeks. We're going to the police, I said. Sienna shook her head immediately. They already filed me missing, she said. They'll say I ran away, or I had an episode, or I got confused. They're going to be the grieving family on TV. She was right. The next morning, we went anyway. At the station, an officer listened politely, but you could see the skepticism building. Maris and Nolan had already made themselves the heroes. Missing person posters, tearful interviews, search party sign-up sheets. Ma'am, the officer said, not cruel, just tired. Without evidence. This becomes a he said, she said. Outside, Sienna's shoulders collapsed. They're going to get away with it, she whispered. I looked at her and felt something old wake up inside me. Not hero stuff. Not vengeance. Just that stubborn refusal to let a liar win because the truth is inconvenient. No, I said. They're not. Here's the part people don't realize about me until they need me. Before I was freelancing, I spent years doing insurance investigations. The boring kind. Fraud claims. Staged accidents. It wasn't me stories that always have a crack if you look long enough. And the one thing I learned is this. Liars don't stop lying. They stack lies on top of lies until the weight crushes them. You just have to find the first crack. I called my friend Dana Price, an attorney who still owes me for helping her prove a fake burglary claim years ago. Dana listened, quiet, then said, "Evan, if they tried to kill her, their story has to be perfect." It won't be. We started digging. We got access to a state record Sienna was legally allowed to see. We pulled credit card statements. We looked at toll histories. We listened to every public interview Maris gave and wrote down every detail. Times, locations, we stopped here, we drove there. We talked to neighbors of Sienna's father. One woman remembered Maris complaining, not quietly, about how expensive disability is. A nurse from the hospital remembered Nolan asking about the cheapest long-term care facility while his stepfather was dying in the next room. And then, at 2 a.m, staring at a statement with my eyes burning, I found it. A charge on Nolan's card at a gas station called Pike's Pantry. Timestamp, 3:41 p.m. The day Sienna was abandoned. According to their missing person report, they were supposedly 50 miles away at that exact time, searching. Dana didn't even let me finish explaining before she said, "We subpoena the footage." Pike's Pantry had cameras. The owner told me he kept cloud backups for 90 days. When Dana got the subpoena approved, we drove there like we were going to a funeral. Quiet, bracing ourselves, because you don't want to hope too hard. In Dana's office, we watched the footage. Grainy, but clear. Nolan's car pulled up. Nolan got out. Then Maris stepped inside the store, and the angle showed the road behind them. They were coming from Hollow Creek Lane's direction, not going toward it. They weren't looking for Sienna. They were leaving her. I felt this electric relief and nausea at the same time. "That's them," Sienna whispered, tears spilling. "That's them." Dana leaned back and said, almost softly, "We have them." Arrests don't happen like TV. There's no dramatic music. It was a Wednesday morning. Maris was taken in outside a yoga studio. Nolan was arrested at his apartment, barefoot, acting offended like the handcuffs were a customer service mistake. The same local news that had been running their heartbroken family story had to pivot fast. Suddenly the headline wasn't, "Young disabled woman missing." It was "Stepmother and stepbrother charged." They tried to smear Sienna, of course. They hinted she was unstable. They suggested she staged it for attention. They played the sympathy card hard. But lies don't do well under light. At the hearing, Dana laid out the timestamps, the footage, the contradictions, the witness statements. Sienna testified calmly, devastatingly, describing the moment she realized the storm wasn't just weather. It was cover. The judge granted protective orders immediately. The estate assets were frozen so Maris couldn't touch them. The criminal case moved forward with charges that actually matched what it was. Not a family misunderstanding, but attempted harm, fraud, conspiracy. After the verdict finally came down guilty, Sienna cried so hard she couldn't breathe. I knelt beside her chair right there in the hallway and let her cry into my shoulder, because sometimes you don't need words. You need a human being who stays. Lila stood a few steps back, quietly wiping her eyes like she'd been doing her whole life without anyone teaching her. And when we got home that day, the house felt different. Not magically healed. Not perfect. Just honest. Sienna didn't disappear after court, like some stories want you to believe. Healing doesn't work like that. She stayed with us for a while because she needed safety and time and a plan. She used her inheritance to set up proper care, not because she was helpless, but because she deserved support without strings. She insisted on paying for modifications to make the downstairs bathroom accessible. I argued. She won. Lila and Sienna bonded in this quiet way that made me ache. Homework at the table, watercolor paints spread out, Lila practicing choir songs while Sienna pretended not to love it. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't change me, too. Not because it turned into some perfect romance overnight, but because it reminded me I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was doing something that mattered. Here's the open-ended part that still keeps me up sometimes. After Maris and Nolan were convicted, after the case became over in the legal sense, Sienna got a call from someone she didn't recognize. A woman with a polite voice, calling on behalf of a family friend, asking about future guardianship arrangements. It sounded professional. Too professional. Like the first move of a new game. We reported it. Nothing came of it. Officially. But it left a sour taste. Because if there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like family. Sometimes they look like people in nice clothes telling a story on the news. And sometimes, the system is slow enough that the only reason someone lives is because one random stranger took one wrong turn and refused to keep driving. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to answer it in the comments because this is where the conversation gets real. If you saw a wheelchair on the side of a deserted road in a storm, would you stop? Or would you tell yourself it's not your business? It's too risky. Someone else will handle it. And if you've ever seen someone get targeted by their own family over money, disability, inheritance, or control, tell me what happened. Do you think justice actually worked here? Or do you think people like Maris always find a new angle? Drop your take below, hit like if you believe one choice can change everything, and subscribe if you want more stories where ordinary people refuse to look away. Because sometimes the difference between tragedy and survival is just one person who stays.